Welcome everybody to season 4, episode 32 of Oz Media's Motivate Me 313 podcast. We got another great show for you today. Looking forward to this episode. It's all about justice for all, a Muslim's attorney's fight for students' rights. We are going to be talking about the Ann Arbor 7 case, and today with us we have attorney Jamil Khuja. I'm sorry about that. Mr. Jamil Khuja is in the building today. Go ahead and give him a round of applause, Mr. the attorney. Was it just two of you guys that were working on this case?
No, it's actually there were 7 that were charged with felonies, and so each person had a lawyer.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
a total of 7 attorneys on the felony cases, and then I also represented a young lady that was charged with a misdemeanor.
Okay.
And there was a total of 11 people charged. There were 7 felonies, so they got a little bit more of the attention.
Yeah.
But there was also 4 misdemeanor cases. 2 of those people that charged with misdemeanors were also facing the felony cases, and then there's 2 others that were not facing felonies, only faced misdemeanors.
All right.
But everybody's done now. So we got
Alhamdulillah.
misdemeanors were dismissed this week. The felonies a few weeks earlier, and now there are no more pending cases out of Ann Arbor.
Yeah. So there we go. We're gonna dive into it really deep, inshallah. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to that conversation. Before we do any of that, be sure to follow us on all of our socials. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. We are also. You can find all those platforms on our website at www.ozmedia313.com. Shout out to the sponsors of the show: Hanley International Academy, Holy Bowly, Wingfellas, Juice Box, Malika Kebab, Jebed Coffee House, Royal Kebab, and Riverfront Cleaning. We're going to start off with the school that is known to all, which is Hanley International Academy. Shout out to Hanley International Academy, and we're going to keep things rolling, so shout out to Hanley. Let's be honest. If you're looking for the place that has the best K-8 school for your child, then the choice should be easy, and that's Hanley International Academy. Hanley International Academy is a school that treats every student and staff like their own family. It's even in their vision statement, educating your child like our own. The academics there are great. The athletics there are great. Thank you to the staff and administrators at Hanley for educating our leaders of tomorrow. To learn more about Hanley, you can visit their website at hanleyacademy.com or call them at 313-875-8888. All right, we're officially back. So with that said, Jamil, let's start off with tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into the case and stuff like that. Can you tell us, who you are and your degrees and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I'm an attorney. I'm Palestinian American. My family comes from Jerusalem. I still have my aunts and uncles living there. We go visit every so often. Last time I was there, I think, was 2022. So it's been about 3 years or so now. But yeah, I grew up. Actually, I was raised in North Carolina. I moved here right before high school. Stayed in Dearborn. Went to college. Went to law school, and after that, I worked as a prosecutor for Wayne County, handling felony trials for about 5 or 6 years before leaving and starting my own firm here in Dearborn. And we handle a number of cases, but for the main part, my focus has been criminal defense for the last about 11 or so years. And so those are the type of cases that I handle is mainly criminal defense, felonies, misdemeanors, federal cases. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 11 years or so after leaving the prosecutor's office.
Alhamdulillah, man. So long journey of defense. And so going off of that, the trial that everybody kind of was keeping track of, which is the Ann Arbor 7 case. People, that's kind of the nickname for it, but it was the case where the Ann Arbor students were, I guess they were, I don't know what the right word is, but basically they were prosecuted in terms of for pretty much standing up for Palestine, standing up for their rights. And obviously it didn't sit well with a lot of people, including yourself and the team that you came up with. And that's why you guys decided to defend these students for free, if I'm correct.
Right. Yeah,
So
nobody charged $1.
nobody charged $1, which is, unheard of. So how did this case come to you? And obviously, I mean, I know you got the roots in that area, but you know, how did this case come to you, and how did that all happen?
So a number of these protesters, most of them were students, but you had other people from the Ann Arbor area, from the surrounding community, that were there expressing their opinions as well on
Okay.
the issue. And in the end, the Attorney General's office ended up charging some students as well as just some community members who happened to be at these protests. I guess that's 7 with felonies and 4 with misdemeanors.
What was the felony exactly?
So the felony charge, well, first they had a misdemeanor charge of trespassing, and they said because you disobeyed the police officer's order that you leave, now you've also assaulted, resisted, or obstructed a police officer performing his duties. And so to answer your first question, the way the case came to me is the the people that were involved in organizing the protest, I guess they had been in communication with a group known as the National Lawyers Guild. And what the National Lawyers Guild does is they will defend people who end up facing criminal charges over protesting, expressing political opinions, things like that. And they will reach out to attorneys they know in certain areas. So this case happened to be in the Detroit area. And they reached out uh, to me and a group of other attorneys to see who would be willing to help. I have worked the National Lawyers Guild before. They organized some representation when a few years ago there was Black Lives Matter protests, and you had some individuals facing charges. I think for the most part it was misdemeanor charges. I don't remember anybody facing felony charges, and I represented a few individuals back then on misdemeanors. And when they reached out again, I said, yeah, no problem. I will step up and do what I can for these protesters as well. Um, and we emailed a couple other lawyers, say, hey, who's willing to help? And we came up with a team to represent each person that was charged with a crime over this.
Yeah. And kudos to you guys again for doing that all for free, by the way, which is very impressive. You don't see that often, but I mean the impact that you guys have and the reward, inshallah. I mean it comes from Allah at the end of the day. I think that's the most
So,
important reward, inshallah. So can you take us through the case now and talk about some of the biggest turning points in the case and how long was this case, and how much did that letter? Because I was reading on it, and it was a letter from the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor, kind of shift the case in your guys' favor.
okay, so initially the charges came down, I want to say in September of
24.
2024.
Okay.
And the the encampment was set up, I believe, in April, and they ended up breaking up the encampment on May 21st of 2024, and that's when uh, these charges arise from when the police came to break up the encampment on May 21st. So some got arrested, others, the police and the attorney general's office reviewed the body cam videos and ended up just mailing
Tickets.
a ticket. Not tickets. Because they were felonies, so they filed charges with the court. They had to have uh, an officer go in front of a judge and swear to what's called a complaint and authorizing these felony charges. And we received notice in the mail. The individuals did, and then reached out, got representation, and we took them to court to do what's called an arraignment for the judge to set bond and schedule the next court dates. And so that process began in September, and there was a lot of discovery for us to go through. Discovery is basically the materials, the evidence that the government claims to have that proves, your client committed the crime they're accused of. And so a lot of it was videos. There's a lot of officers there, there's body cams. They had drones above recording things, and we had to go through all this. We had to go through all these videos, Can't just assume something's on a video. We got to go through every single piece, and so that caused some delays. Typically, you have what's called a preliminary examination on a felony charge, where the government's got to prove to a judge that there's what's called probable cause you committed the crime you're accused of committing. And we want to review all the evidence before holding that preliminary exam. And given that there's 7 attorneys on one side and then there's the Attorney General's office on the other side, we've got to pick dates that work for everybody. So the case had some delays at the beginning, but once we went through all the evidence, we began. I want to say we began the examination in February, and it went most of the day because the Attorney General would call the witnesses, and then each defendant's attorney would get to cross-examine that witness, and so between 7 of us, that took much longer than usual on with each witness. So we did the exam in part on one day, then we went back on another day. It was like a month or so later to hopefully finish the exam. And so I want to say it was a total of 5 witnesses called by the government. Each one of them was cross-examined. And, there's some complicated issues. Typically, at an exam, the judge would rule at the conclusion of the exam whether he finds probable cause and sends the case over to the circuit court. The case begins in the district court, which covers Ann Arbor, and then if he finds enough evidence, it should have gone to the circuit court of Washtenaw County. In our case, upon finishing the presentation of the evidence, the government presenting videos and we questioning the witnesses, there was there's some free speech issues. That's kind of what's hanging over the case, right? Is these people are exercising their First Amendment right to express their political opinions, and when the police officers show up and they say, "You guys got to go," the issue is, well, was that even a lawful order to begin with, right? Because they're on public property, they're expressing political speech. That's what the First Amendment protects, right? Our right to express our opinions, especially political opinions, on public property. And is it going to cause a disturbance? Sometimes, sure. That's sometimes the point of the protest. Nobody wants to go protest on quietly or in the middle of nowhere where nobody's going to notice you, right? You want to protest at a place where there are going to be others who might look and say, "Hey, what are these guys protesting about? Let me look into that issue," right? You want to change people's views, right? And that's what they're doing. So when the police show up and say, "Hey, we want you guys out of here," is that lawful for them under the Constitution to order them to leave like that? And so for the felony charge of resisting, obstructing, opposing police, it's, well, were they even performing a lawful duty, right? Was their order that these people leave, was that even lawful to begin with? Because if it wasn't a lawful order, then that's not resisting, obstructing police, and that's kind of what the issue was. And so it's not an issue that typically is dealt with in criminal cases all the time. It's not your typical criminal case. And so what the judge did back in March, he said, well, there's some issues here that I want you guys to submit briefs. And in lawyer terms, that's basically give me some writing, write a report for me. and we would say why the issue, the order was not lawful, because they're exercising their First Amendment rights to free speech, and the government would argue otherwise. And so we began working on our briefs to submit to the judge. It's a complex issue. I want to say we probably drafted probably over 20 or so pages of this. But in the meantime, I happened to read the Free Press one morning, and there's a case in Hamtramck where the Attorney General's office had been investigating some city council members. And the Attorney General's office filed what's called a petition in Hamtramck. They filed a petition to appoint a special prosecutor. And so that's not uncommon. Uh, if the prosecutor believes that they have a conflict of interest or that they're not able to handle a case, they might say, hey, uh, for example, that's Wayne County, Hamtramck. So if it was a case that was prosecuted by the Wayne County prosecutor, Kim Worthy, and she thought she has a conflict for some reason, she would file this petition and say, hey, could another prosecutor take a look at this? And it would either be, a neighboring county, maybe Oakland or Macomb or something, or the Attorney General's office, right, would step up and say, hey, we'll take this case. Now, in that case in Hamtramck, the Attorney General was the one investigating these folks. And so she filed this petition. And one of the things she said in the petition was she cited the Ann Arbor case and said that because of her prosecution of this case, there have been accusations. She says uh, they're not credible, but she cited these accusations that she is biased against Arabs and Muslims because of her prosecution of the Ann Arbor case. And so therefore, she didn't want that accusation in Hamtramck. So, could another prosecutor please take over this case and handle the investigation and prosecution of those city council members? So when we saw that, we said, hey, if you are taking the accusation so serious that you've signed your name to a petition saying that's part of the reason I need to be taken off this case in Hamtramck. So, well, you shouldn't be on the case in Ann Arbor either. So at that point, we shifted our focus from arguing whether these people were actually guilty of the crimes they're charged with to saying, hey, this shouldn't even be the prosecutor on the case. She should be kicked off the case. And, that's a whole different issue, right?
So it's safe to say Hamtramck was involved somehow, some way, and it kind of helped the situation a little bit. A little bit. I'm trying to give Hamtramck some leeway, man.
No, the Attorney General bringing us up in Hamtramck,
Yeah.
Gave us kind of the ammo we needed
Yeah.
to get her removed from our case in Ann Arbor.
And you're saying this because Dana, I think Nessel, right?
Right, that's the Attorney General.
Yeah, she's also Jewish descent, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, for people at home that don't know why she's
No, that's fine. But
Yeah.
I mean, so I've known the Attorney General Nessel before she was even an Attorney General. I've known her for years. Never had any issues with her.
Yeah.
Right. Never had any problems with her. She knows I'm Palestinian. I know she's Jewish. It's not,
Yeah.
That's not.
In the professional world, that's
anybody's concerned about.
Yeah.
When what our issue was that she had been raising concerns about protesters and about language that was being used by Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib regarding this issue. And so our argument, had nothing to do with her identity, her religion, her ethnicity, nothing to do with any of that. We said, hey, you've expressed all these anti-Palestinian views. And, maybe that wouldn't have been enough for a judge to say, I'm going to forcibly remove a prosecutor from a case. I mean, that's pretty unheard of for it to happen. It's a pretty rare thing that a judge orders a prosecutor off of a case.
Yeah.
All right. Especially an attorney general. I don't know. Honestly, we were researching it, and I don't know of any instance where an attorney general was forcibly removed from a case before this. But she had expressed all these views, and one of the main things was that there's the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, right? And that's a phrase, that I many others that have
Chanted.
been to Palestinian protests and been chanting for decades, right? Since I was a kid. And, she said that, it was deeply hurtful, painful to hear people use that phrase. And She was standing with another state senator who said that they viewed that as a call for the killing and eradication of Jews. And, um, that it hurt to hear people say that over essentially a demand for freedom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's saying we should be free. I mean, that's one of the things we said in court. Was like I said, they're asking to be free. What else should they want? Well, what should any people want other than to be free, right? It doesn't. That's not calling for the eradication or death of anybody, right? To demand our rights and our freedoms. Uh, to want my family who lives in Jerusalem to have the same rights as a Jewish family who lives 5 minutes away. That doesn't mean I want that family dead.
Yeah.
I want the same rights. I want freedom.
Yeah.
And so we knew all these things. We knew that this case is not a case that normally would have gone to the Attorney General, right? Attorney General's office typically handles more complex cases. Um, you know, um, Not some trespassing and resisting and obstructing police that you see every day in district courts throughout the state, handled by the local county prosecutor. In fact, the misdemeanors are typically handled by a city attorney. Um, you know, so in this case, the attorney general, who's the most powerful law enforcement officer in our state, said, "I'm going to prosecute these guys." And why? What stood out about these folks that's different from anybody else? None of the Black Lives Matter protesters that I represented were charged by the attorney general. Those were all local prosecutors charged some minor misdemeanors and things like that, and most of the cases worked themselves out. But here, she's charging a felony, and they weren't willing to budge. And we knew that her political opinions that she expressed probably had something to do with why the assistant attorneys general that were sent to court didn't have the authority to really make any offers or do anything with these cases. So we had to fight.
Yeah.
But when she filed that petition in Hamtramck, we said, hey, now it's not just us going into court and trying to speculate. Now we have a letter from the attorney general saying that there's this appearance that I'm biased against Arabs and Muslims, combined with all the things she's been saying over the last year about Arabs and Muslims and folks who are protesting over Palestine, what's taking place in Gaza. We said all of this combined gives us what we need to go into court and make a credible argument to the judge, because it's a very high standard to get a prosecutor kicked off a case.
Yeah.
And so we didn't. That's why we didn't file it right away. We didn't file it right away because we thought, hey, we don't want to lose credibility with the judge. But once she filed that petition, that combined with everything else we had, we said, all right, now we got what we need. So
And it worked.
it worked.
Yeah. And then came. I know we're kind of going back. I mean, going back to the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor letter. Then came along, and that was another turning point, I believe. So take us through that.
So, we filed our motion to recuse the attorney general, and typically what would happen in that situation, if the motion was granted, is the case is not dismissed. We just have to continue the fight, but it would be a different prosecutor to take over the case. Perhaps the Washtenaw County prosecutor, who's also Jewish, could be another prosecutor. And by the way, Eli Savitt, who is the Washtenaw County prosecutor, he prosecuted some individuals about a year or so ago over Palestine protests that, some individuals had gone a little too far.
Yeah.
But he was very reasonable, his office was, in terms of resolving the cases and, working with the defense attorneys to come up with a reasonable solution to these cases. So nobody accused him of any bias. And that's one of the things we pointed out. Nobody mentioned the attorney general being Jewish. It wasn't an issue to us. It wasn't an issue to any of the attorneys. Some of the attorneys didn't even know. The attorney general, though, in her response to our motion, said they are asking you to do this because I'm Jewish, and basically accused us of being anti-Semitic. Like I said, this is somebody who I've known for years. So that kind of hurt me to have that accusation uh, hurled at me from someone that I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but look, my job is to my clients. I don't care about personal friendships or, you know, professional relationships. My job is to defend my client, and so we pushed harder. Um, so essentially, they filed their response. We filed more briefs, and we were supposed to go in and get a ruling from Judge Simpson on this motion. Um, it was scheduled for on Monday morning. Now this had been going on since like beginning of March was when we first filed the motion to recuse the attorney general, and we were going in. I think it was beginning of May to get a ruling because we had been back and forth a couple times on it, and the judge had more questions. So I think it was Saturday night at about 8:30 or so. I get an email, all the attorneys and the assistant attorney general on the case get an email from the court clerk saying that it attaches this letter we got from the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor, essentially telling the judge to deny our motion, right? Saying that this would be the first time in history that a prosecutor is kicked off of a case because of her faith and ethnicity, and how wrong it would be to grant our motion, and that the attorney general is not biased against the Arabs and Muslims, and basically presenting information to a judge outside of court and trying to influence his decision. And the direction was, I guess it was mailed to the courthouse with instructions to get that letter to Judge Simpson. And so the email we got from the court clerk said, we want you to be aware that we received this, and Judge Simpson will be looking um, into this, as well as what options are available to him, including launching an investigation into an improper attempt to influence the judge. Uh, I didn't know what to make of it. At first, when I opened the email, I thought, oh God, I hope it's not, somebody from our side trying to influence the judge over the weekend right before we were going to get a ruling. Because I thought the facts were on our side. I thought we made a solid argument. I fully expected to win on Monday morning.
Yeah.
And I was hoping somebody from our side didn't screw it up for us. Just some supporter that we don't even know. But then I open the attachment, and I read it. It's, that the letterhead of the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor, and talking about how great Dana Nessel is and how wrong it would be to grant this defense motion. It's based in anti-Semitism. And I said, "Phew, at least it's somebody on their side
Yeah.
trying to interfere, not us. We didn't do anything wrong." And so, driving into court Monday morning, we didn't know what to make of it. And then we find out, we go in there, the assistant attorney general that was there said, we are actually moving to dismiss this case now.
Go ahead and give that a round
So
of
that
applause,
gives-
man. Hey, that's
So-
that's Allah, man.
Yeah, so I mean that ended up being a better result for us than getting a different prosecutor assigned to it, because I mean, yeah, we were gonna still fight,
Yeah.
but we thought we still had months and months more left to go.
Yeah. Thanks to that letter.
Yeah, but
Do you think it's that letter? Like, do you think that or you just
no,
think
I think that
overall?
letter probably brought more attention, opened a whole new can of worms that the attorney general didn't want to deal with. And over the weekend we did our research. We've seen that the attorney general has spoken at an event for this group before, and was actually scheduled to speak for him at an event of theirs a couple days later, and I think she still spoke at that event. So pretty clear to us that she had some connection to this group.
Yeah.
I don't think she knew they were going to send this letter, or that they ran this by her, because I'm almost positive if they had told her we're sending this letter, she probably would have said,
Don't do it.
don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? But, the judge saying, I'm going to look into this attempt to influence a judge, I could only assume the attorney general wouldn't want an investigation like that launched into a group that she might be close with.
Yeah.
She's spoken at their events and speaking at future events. So I don't know if the thought process was, hey, maybe if I just dismiss this case, everything goes away, and it's fine by me. my job is to protect my clients and hopefully keep their records clean, keep them out of jail. Um, I don't really care to see, a rabbi at the Jewish Federation of Ann Arbor investigated. I don't.
Yeah.
Doesn't help our case or hurt our case. It's not something we want to see. Whatever their logic was of deciding to throw in the towel Monday morning, um, you know, doesn't make any difference to me.
What was your first thoughts when you heard that they dismissed the case? Like as the one of the attorneys that were assigned to the case, right when you heard that, hey, they dismissed it Monday morning, what was your first thoughts?
I mean, it was a sigh of relief for these defendants we were representing, that this was this weight was lifted off of their shoulders, right? They no longer had to worry about, am I going to have a felony conviction, right? Am I potentially going to go to jail, right? Because resisting obstructing the police officer is a felony. Any felony is punishable by more than a year in jail. So this has a maximum of 2 years. Doesn't mean any reasonable judge would have gave them 2 years, but it's a possibility.
Yeah.
And I prepared my client and the others that if there's a guilty verdict at the end of this, there's always the possibility that a judge says, I'm going to give you 2 years, but more realistically, there's a chance that he says, I'm going to give you a month or so in the county jail, and so jail time was a real possibility for these guys. And I give them credit. They were willing to risk it for what they believed in. And look, out of the 7 charged with the felonies, I think one was Muslim, and there was a couple Jewish students who believed in this cause, but yeah, they were, for the most part, were not Arab, not Muslim defendants that were charged. Some of the misdemeanor had an Arab woman that I also represented. The young man represented on the felony was Jewish. I met his parents, great people. They essentially, I didn't know when I first came to represent him. I just happened to ask him, hey, Michael, what drew you to this case? Or what kind of drew you to this issue? What made you concerned about what's happening in Gaza? And he said that he told me he was Jewish, and he was ashamed of what they're doing and claiming to do it in the name of Jews.
Yeah.
And so he passionately believed in protesting it, and that's why he was there at the encampment. And the encampment went for about a month.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys, they were there regularly. They'd go to class, come back to the camp. They were sleeping there.
Yeah, I've seen the videos, man.
Yeah.
It was
They believed in their cause.
It was crazy times, man. It was crazy times, man. And kudos to you guys, man, for defending these people. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to run a quick little ad break, ad number 2 of the day. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to our good friends over there at Royal Kebab, Yusuf. So shout out to Royal Kebab. And we're going to continue on with this conversation with attorney Jamil here. So shout out to Royal Kebab. Guess who's back? Back again. Royal Kebab is back. Tell a friend. Yes, that is right. The restaurant that you all have been dying for to open back up is officially back operating in Hamtramck. Royal Kebab offers the same mouth-watering Middle Eastern dishes as their sister company, Melek Kebab. You can order their lamb over rice, combo platters, shish platters, shawarma sandwiches or plates, fattoush and tabbouleh salads, all at the newly renovated Royal Kebab restaurant located on Kniff Street in Hamtramck, Michigan. So be sure to check out their website, royalkebab.com, before you make your next order and see why so many people have been raving about this restaurant. All right, we're back now. All right, just want to make sure we're good to go. So my question to you that I was going to ask you before the show, but I'll ask you this now is, do you work on other cases while working on like a big case like this one?
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, I've got to make a living, right?
Oh, I mean, it was free.
We're running a business.
Yeah.
And you have cases, and you try to balance the your workload,
Yeah.
right? Like actually, right before this case, I had a case with the Attorney General's office that was a pretty complex homicide case,
Yeah.
and that actually went to a full jury trial. And so that was going, and then this came, and you still have other cases. You keep a calendar, you dedicate
Stay
time to
organized.
each case.
Yeah.
You got to try to stay organized.
Okay.
That's
So, as a criminal attorney who has defended Palestinian students, with everything that has been going on, would you still recommend students to continue to speak up and protest for Palestine on campuses? It's a tough question, man. I'm sorry to ask you.
yeah.
But
It's look, it's of course. I
yeah.
mean, people got we can't. This is a country that was founded on, you challenge authority, you challenge the status quo, you express your views, and you're loud about it. That's what America is. And yeah, don't break the law, follow the law, but don't let them scare you into silence. All right, don't let, whether it's the Attorney General in Michigan or Trump's Department of Justice throughout the country. Don't let those who want to abuse their power scare people into silence. I mean, that's what they're doing. That's the playbook. Is they want people to shut up about this issue,
Yeah.
right? They want them to go away and basically let them continue committing a genocide without even anybody
Saying it.
saying anything about it. That's but look, everybody's got to make that judgment call for themselves. Like I know, there's people who are here, international students, things, and they've seen, those here on student visas getting just, picked up off the street and sitting in jail in Louisiana fighting deportation. One girl for writing an op-ed. You know, um, that's a big risk. I mean, like I tell clients all the time, not just on this type of case, but the lawyer, like, to me, I'm basically, I'm making arguments in court, right? I go in, I want to win.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you're found guilty of breaking the law, of committing a crime, there's a chance you might go to jail. All right. The lawyer is going to be disappointed, but he's going to be disappointed at home. I'm going to be disappointed over a loss, but they're not going to take me away. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's, I like, don't let them scare you into silence, but also be smart, be careful, and that's part of the reason why these guys won their case too, because whether the prosecutor dismissed this or got off of this case or not, the facts of it, we knew we were going to win. All right. First, they hadn't broken any laws. All right. The police trying to say, hey, they were trespassing. Trespassing what? On a public sidewalk, where some of them were enrolled in school and paying tuition. Why are they being kicked off of there anyway? But when they were kicked off, for the most part, from the videos we saw, they kind of they stood there. They didn't throw punches at the officers or do anything like that. For example, my client, and this really disgusted me, that the Attorney General had the officer testifying, and he said they did a still shot, and I want to say it was like 9:54, the timestamp on his body cam, of what looked like my client's arms hooked around a baton, like this, okay? And she told him, describe what happened there. He said, yeah, he hooked his arms around my baton. All right. Now, look, I went through hours and hours of videos. All right. I spent months going through this stuff. I got notes, everything. So when he paused it at 9:54, I knew that at like 9:46, he had been pepper sprayed. All right. And so, okay, you want to tell the judge that? Go ahead. Because I'm going to get a chance to question him in a couple minutes. And so when I did, I told him, you paused it at 9:54. You showed the judge. You said my client hooked your baton. Um, I'm gonna back you up about 8 seconds. All right. Tell me what happened. You know, kid's pepper sprayed. And he said, I didn't pepper spray him. I don't know, one of the other officers did. I said, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just telling you what we see on there is he's pepper sprayed, right? And when you're pepper sprayed, the reaction is that's burning. You're trying to wipe
Yeah.
that out of your eyes,
Yeah.
you know? So he's got his arms like this, and you see him. Put the video in slow motion. The officer goes and he puts the baton over his arms. The kid's arms are already up like this. The officer puts his baton over it. I'm like, he didn't hook the baton like he's trying to rip it away from you. He's just trying to wipe his eyes. You know, and you could see it when we did that, the judge had like a look of disgust in his face, like they tried to mislead me. You know? So forget all the issues that ended up coming up that caused the dismissal. I was confident if we went to a jury trial, if this case made it that far, if a judge let it get as far as a jury, that a jury of residents of Washtenaw County were gonna, whether they agreed or disagreed with these people's position on this issue, we're gonna say this is what our country is founded on. You know, they're expressing political opinions that the government doesn't agree with. We don't criminalize that.
I'm gonna ask you a question off of that because it makes me wonder. Do you think, even though the case was dismissed, it was still a minor victory for them because they got them off the campus from the encampments? They obviously put stress in these people's lives for a year. Like you mentioned, the fear of you don't know what's next. Oh, I just had to deal through all this just because I stood up for what I wanted to believe in. Like, do I really want to do this again? You know what I mean? Like, do you think that was intentional? And like, okay, maybe we won't win, but at least we'll do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, they they got the encampment shut down. You know, next kid's thinking about starting up an encampment or protesting in a similar way. Probably saw, hey, I saw, you know, my buddies are going through. I just want to graduate.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to risk my degree. Ultimately, all these the ones who were students were able to graduate. Um, you know, and part of what they wanted to do was, so they essentially they made an offer. They said, all right, we'll dismiss the felony. They can have probation, no jail time on a misdemeanor. All right, but they got to sign a statement, and that's typically when you do a resolve a case by a plea, you've got to just, the judge will ask you, what did you do, right? And you say, this is what I did, and if it makes out the elements of the crime, for example, if it's an assault and battery, and you say, I put my hands on somebody without their permission, that's enough, you know, for that to be convicted of that crime. They wanted a statement saying, you know, we were not engaged in peaceful protests, we were violent, things like that. Why is that necessary if they're gonna plead guilty to a misdemeanor like trespassing, right? And that they wanted that victory to say, hey, even they said they were not peaceful and they were violent, when that's not the truth. The truth is there was no violence until the police showed up in riot gear, right? I mean, these folks were there for a month.
Yeah.
You know, they were getting along. They had like, you know, bookshelves, like a little library. You know, teaching people information.
Yeah.
And the only violence that started was when the police showed up at 5:30 in the morning when they were sleeping in their tents. You know,
Tearing apart everything.
yeah, tear it apart and throw them out. And you see it on the video. They're launching people. That's the violence. And so, you know, I mean, hey, you know, props to these guys. You know, the students and the ones who were not students that said, hey, we're not going to sign that. I'd rather risk going to jail, having a felony on my record, and struggling to find a job, and I'm just graduating college, than sign that and give the attorney general the satisfaction of saying, you know, that I was violent and I wasn't peaceful. You know,
Shout out to them, man. That's not easy.
look, I told them, I was like, look, I'm not gonna judge you. You know, I'm glad you guys are out here expressing your views, but if you know, if you're worried and you want to take some sort of deal, you know, there's no judgment for that.
Yeah.
You know, I get it. It's your future, and you want to try to protect your future. And he said, no, we didn't do anything wrong. Every single one of them said, nope, we're not even thinking about it for a second.
Going back to the students, so I asked those questions because I did want you to say the things you exactly said, because I don't want people to be afraid, because that's what they want, the other
Right.
side. So, do you have a list of do's and don'ts for students in college, and what would they be?
I mean,
Just a couple off the
it,
top of
it,
your head, yeah.
you know, every situation is different, right? And it's hard to predict exactly what the other side is going to do. You know, you might think the police are going to show up in riot gear at 5 a.m. while these guys are just sleeping in a tent. No, right? But you know, don't when the police show up, you know, you're expressing your views. Express your views. If they tell you to back up, back up. If there's, you know, if they're doing something wrong, and we can challenge it in court later. Don't try to challenge it on their turf. All right, on out on the streets where they've got tasers and guns, and they're wearing riot gear and you know whatever else they got, and you're just basically in your shorts and t-shirt. All right, you know, you can shout, you can chant your slogans, express your views, you know, but don't don't ever put your hands on the officer. Don't you know? Don't fight them. All right, we'll fight them in court. You know, and that's where we won. And that's what these guys did. You know, watching the video, honestly, um, the violence came from the cops. It did not come from these protesters.
Which helped them
Right.
in the case. So, how about, there's been a lot of videos I've seen on social media, with going to airports, people going, with all the stuff that's been happening now with, people obviously getting detained just for their views on social media or anything, or public views. So can you give us maybe a do's and don'ts when someone goes to an airport?
You have very little rights at the airport, all right? Because it's considered a border. So it's an international border, just like crossing the bridge to Canada or going across the border to Mexico. These are every airport is considered an international border, all right? And so you have very little rights to privacy. Typically, if I'm driving my car and the police want to search my car, I can say no. All right. Now, if they're gonna do it anyway, all right, don't get in their way. Just don't give them permission. Just don't say I agree to it.
Yeah.
All right. But if they're gonna do it, step out of the way, let them do their thing, and you know if they've done wrong, your lawyer should be able to fight it in court. All right. But at the airport, you don't have that right to privacy where they can't
Look at anything.
look at like on the side of the road. Yeah, they can be looking through your phone unless they have a warrant or some sort of exception to the warrant requirement that they just go ahead and search your car, your phone, without a warrant. But at the airport, because it's an international border, the government's concerns for security are like at their top under the law. That they will be allowed to do that, and you know, it happened to my co-consul Amir Makhlid, right? He was coming back from vacation with his family, and they started questioning him and wanted to go through his phone. Ultimately, they are able to go through the phone. Now he started saying, "Well, hi, I'm an attorney. You know, I got communication from my clients and stuff on there. That stuff's got to stay private. You can't be going through that."
So ultimately, they're allowed to look through your phone.
They are
Okay.
at the airport, yeah.
I remember them saying something about like having a passcode or something, or
Yeah, well, so you have a right to remain silent, okay? They can't force you to give them a passcode, all right? But there's been case law. I went up to the Supreme Court a few years back that, you know, you having the fingerprint or the face ID, that's not, you don't have to speak. They can force you to put your they can go to a judge and have you ordered to put your finger on the phone or put your face in front of it, and then it unlocks and they can go through everything, right? You don't have a right to not put your finger on a phone or not put your face in front of it.
So no Face ID is what you recommend.
But you do have a right to not say anything, and you can't be forced to say your password, right? Can't force you to do that. So yeah, I have a password on my phone. I tell everybody.
Do you have Face ID?
No, I don't. I don't activate that, and doesn't mean because I got something to hide or I've done anything wrong.
Yeah.
I got a right to privacy. I mean, that's in our Constitution. It's the Fourth Amendment. You know, we have a right to expect privacy. We have a the reasonable expectation of privacy, and why would anybody want somebody going through,
Anything.
private
Yeah.
messages, their photos of their family? I mean, um, if you ask me, you're not a cop. If you ask me, hey, can I look through your phone? I'm like, no, for what?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want me looking through your phone either.
Yeah.
Right? People have just stuff, doesn't mean it's anything
No.
wrong, but it's private. We can expect that it stay private. So, and look, if you're not a citizen, you're coming into the country. Obviously, there's more that the government can do to you, right? They can deny you entry for refusing to give them your password or refusing to let them go through your phone. They can try to deny you entry. I'm a citizen, right? Yeah. Amir, the other attorney on the case that got stopped like that at the airport, he's a citizen. He knew. Like, what are they gonna do? They can't deny me entry.
Yeah.
I'm a citizen of this country. They can't deport me. What are they gonna do? They might keep my phone, but I'm not giving it up to them. They might keep it, but I'm not gonna give them access to it.
Do they ever give it back?
Yeah. So what he ended up doing was they like, I guess, negotiated with him at the airport. Said, well, how about we don't want to go through all your messages and your emails and all this other stuff that, some of it might be friends or some of it might be business. It might be clients that they should expect that their communications with their attorney stay private. They shouldn't have no FBI agents going through it, or border patrol agents. But they said, well, could we at least look at your contact list and then we'll let you go. And so I guess he told them, yeah, I don't care. You can see a list of names. You can't see what those people said to me or, things like that. But you can go through a list of names. And then once I asked, well, who's this and who's that? He said, well, look, everybody that's in there is either like family, friend, client. That's it. And I'm not going to say and give you any more information than that. And then, they let him go, I guess, after, inconveniencing him for a few hours or so, with his family.
Well, there you have it. Those are some, do's and don'ts for students and also for how you should approach a situation at the airports. We're going to run our last ad. Believe it or not, we're moving into the last third of the show. So let's go ahead and give a shout out to our good friends over there at Holy Bowly. Shout out to Holy Bowly, and we're going to keep things rolling. So shout out to Holy Bowly. Holy moly, you have to try out Holy Bowly. Holy Bowly is your go-to destination for vibrant bowls and delicious sandwiches. Everything they serve is 100% fresh, and they have halal options as well. Their mouth-watering bowls are always packed to the top, so you're getting the most bang for your buck. They currently have 2 locations in Detroit, and you can check out all their food on their website at www.myholybowly.com. Yeah, we were joking about it, but get rid of Face IDs for real. I mean, you guys, just to, be safe, rather than be safe than sorry. You know what I'm saying? So now it's more so you. I usually start off the show talking about this, but I wanted to dive in right into the meat of the conversation. But now it's more so what made you want to pursue a career in criminal law, and then how did you kind of focus on more so the defense part where you're defending the students' rights?
I mean, growing up, just, dad's always watching the news and just politics was kind of interesting. And, I always liked social studies and, those types of classes. And when I went to undergrad, I got my degree in political science. And I knew all along I wanted to go to law school, right? I knew that's what I wanted to do. I want to be a lawyer. And getting a degree in political science is like very limited. What am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
Right. Work as a professor or go work for a politician or, and I was like, no, I'm going to law school. So went to law school. When I came out of law school, it was
What school did you go to?
I went to Cooley Law School in Lansing. I went to University of Michigan, Dearborn for undergrad,
Okay.
and then
Cooley for
for law school. Yeah, I got a scholarship and went there.
nice. Alhamdulillah.
So yeah, I had some other lawyers in the family that gave me good advice. I was basically, yeah, I got the scholarship offer. And I was like, yeah, I want to go to a bigger law school, or maybe go out of state or something like that.
They
And
said follow the money.
they said, are you crazy? You want to have all this debt when you graduate? Just nobody cares.
Yeah. As long as you
Sometimes
got the
maybe the
degree.
first job, but after that, nobody really cares when you went to law school. Like the issue is, are you a good lawyer?
Yeah.
Right? And so graduate with as little debt as you can. So that's what I did. And when I came out, I had my last year. I got an internship at the prosecutor's office. I was really thinking criminal law. I wasn't really what my focus was. Law school, you take some elective classes, but for the most part, you graduate with your law degree and you can do whatever kind of law you want.
Yeah.
You can end up kind of focusing on certain things over others. But I ended up doing this internship at the prosecutor's office, and it was great because there's a court rule in Michigan that lets you, as a student, appear in court if you're working for a prosecutor or a public defender's office. And so at the prosecutor's office, I don't know, they were kind of impressed. They let me do a jury trial. I was still a student.
Nice.
So I was able to do a jury trial. A lot of lawyers, they'll finish their career having never done a jury trial. I was able to knock one out before I even graduated, and so it was a good experience. Then they hired me after, and the rest is history. I ended up staying with them for a few years. It's good experience at the prosecutor's office. You do a lot of trials, you go to court a lot. But ultimately I wanted to change. I wanted, I had kids and I wanted more flexibility in my hours and things like that. If I need to leave early to pick up my kid from school or something like that, it just made more sense to work for myself. So that's what I did.
Alhamdulillah that you did decide to do that, even if it was just this one. I mean, obviously, I know you've done a lot more, but even if it was just this one Ann Arbor 7 case, it's been an impact on the community. So, thank you for what you're doing, and everyone else that was a part of that, all the other attorneys as well. How does your Muslim identity influence your approach to law and advocacy, even does it? You know?
I mean, look, our religion, commands us to be just and to stand against injustice, right? And so that's part of what I do. When I take on a case, I can be selective in the cases I take. Sometimes we get calls at the office for certain types of cases, and I'm like, nah, that one's not for me. It's not just about the money. But sometimes you get cases that you feel like somebody is being persecuted or oppressed by the government. Feel like you're gonna, you're taking a stand against injustice at that point, and that's what I feel like it was with this case. I've had others like that. Can I say, hey, every one of my cases is that way? No. Some people make mistakes. They make a mistake and they want to learn from it. They don't want to go to jail forever.
Yeah.
And your job is to try to, if you can remedy a mistake they made, and hopefully it's a learning lesson. It can. I had one client years ago, probably 6-7 years, came to me. It wasn't like a huge mistake. It wasn't a huge crime, but he messed up, And he came to me and said, Jamil, I really messed up. I been praying and I go to the mosque, and he truly was remorseful for what happened. I said, okay, I'll do what I can. I got to take a look at the case, see what kind of defense we can put up for you. In his case, it was the police had done a search and reviewing the videos of what took place. You gotta always look at the evidence, right? So we reviewed the body cam video, the scout car video of the traffic stop, and it was totally different than the police report. And I was able to, in his case, get the evidence suppressed. Means, hey, the police had no right to be searching.
So what they
So whatever they
found,
found, they can't
yeah.
use it in court, right? Now, if we just had the report, if I didn't take the time to order the videos and go through it, what the officer put in his report was enough to search the car, but the video showed that that wasn't really what happened. And so, the reason I remember him is because years later, I'll still get text messages from him. I'll see him at the mosque sometimes, on Jum'ah and Eid and things like that.
Forever thankful.
And he's like always there. I mean, it's
For-
been like 7 years, like,
Yeah, no,
but
it's
I
like
see
that.
that, like, yeah, he learned his lesson, he made
Yeah.
a mistake, and he's like straightened his life out,
Yeah.
and that's always, it feels rewarding when you see that happen.
So what advice do you have for someone who is trying to pursue a career in criminal law? It sounds like you're about to say, don't do it.
No, no. Look, my younger sister's a lawyer. I tried to tell her don't do it, but she didn't listen. She finished law school. She's very successful. She does business law.
Alhamdulillah.
And no, I tell people to do it. It's you get enjoyment out of your work. There's always something interesting. This case was interesting. Next case will be interesting. There's always something different going on. And so, you got to have good grades. All right, you got in high school, you got to focus, get good grades, try to earn yourself a scholarship. School's expensive. It's
Yeah.
even more expensive than it is now than it is when I went. But undergrad's expensive, and don't mess around in high school. Take it serious. You got to start in high school right now. Try to preach that to him. To earn himself a scholarship. It makes it easier on your parents. It makes it easier, that you don't take on some student debt. And you got to take that serious. Now, for undergrad, it doesn't matter. People think that, I got to do criminal justice or I got to do political science, like I thought, or whatever. But you just got to have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
So if there's, there was guys in law school with me that were engineers, and a lot of them finished law school. Now they're doing like patent law. They're making good money, So you can, my advice would be, if you're gonna you're gonna have to get a bachelor's degree if you want to do law school. But when you're 18, you don't know what your interests are gonna be. So try to pick a major that if when you're 20, 21, 22, about to graduate, if you had a change of heart and you think, I don't want to do law school and do another 3 years of schooling, at least you've got a bachelor's degree that you can pursue a career in,
Yeah.
right? Outside of law.
Yeah.
And if you end up going to law school, hey, that's a great career too. It's very rewarding. You help people. Like in my case, yeah, as a criminal defense attorney, yeah, you feel like, yeah, I helped somebody get out of a bad situation they were in. But also when I was a prosecutor, there's plenty of good prosecutors out there. They're fair. Some people are victims of crime, and you're going to court as a prosecutor and trying to get them justice, and so that feels very rewarding too. Prosecuted a guy one time that committed a murder, and getting justice for that victim's family, his parents. It was a young kid. He was like 20 years old. He was shot and killed. And so when his parents are there and you feel like, hey, I got them justice. I can't bring their kid back, but I got them justice. And that's rewarding too. So it's rewarding. I feel like on criminal law, it could be rewarding on both sides. You just got to do your job right and be ethical in the way you handle a case, regardless of whether it's as a prosecutor or a defense attorney.
Well, first of all, thank you to my man over here, man, Mr. Attorney Jamil. Go ahead and give him a round of applause. Kudos to you for coming on here. I know you're a busy man, and you worked with our schedule, which I appreciate you so much. And I was telling him beforehand, we usually book guests like a month in advance, but this was like a week, last minute kind of thing. So I appreciate you for working with us, and jazakallah khair for that. First of all, again, this was all about justice for all, a Muslim's attorney fight for students' rights. It's with Attorney Jamil. Again, you can check out our episode on YouTube, the full episode, but we also have the social media, where the clips are going to be posted on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. All these platforms are on our website at ozmedia313.com. Shout out to the sponsors of the show: Hanley International Academy, Holy Bowly, Wingfellas, Juice Box, Melike Kebab, Jebel Coffee House, Royal Kebab, and Riverfront Cleaning. Jamil, we're gonna let you close out this show with any final word, final comments, anything you'd like to say or add, or maybe something that I forgot to mention that you'd like to talk about.
I just tell people, hey, anybody wants to go do a career in law, it's an honorable profession. It's what you make of it. You got if do it the right way. It can be very rewarding. And for those who believe in free speech and especially on Palestine, don't be scared. Speak your mind. Just like in this case, there's good people out there that will step up and defend you if the government is being oppressive. I'm not the only one that decided, hey, you know what, this is important enough that I'm gonna volunteer my time and do it for free. There, in this case alone, we had 7 other attorneys. Not all of them Muslim or even Arab or even have anything to do with Palestine, right? They knew about the issue and they knew it was right and they knew that it was wrong what the government was doing. And he got in other states, in New York and in different places where the Trump administration is trying to deport international students. You got lawyers stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to help these kids, and that's part of what happens when the government tries to oppress these folks is they bank on, hey, it's hard for people to afford a lawyer. Lawyers are expensive. We charge a lot, right? And a lot of people can't afford to fight the government. The government's got unlimited resources.
Yeah.
But when you're on a righteous issue and the government is oppressing you, there are plenty of organizations and lawyers out there that will help. And so, be smart, but don't be scared. Do the right thing. And inshallah, you never go through this. But if you do, there's people out there that will help.
One more round of applause, Yusuf, please, and thank you. And I just want to say this. If being a criminal law attorney has me dressing like that, mashallah, then hey, I need to change my career too, man. You're looking clean out there, man. I was telling him I look underdressed, but at least we did the blue thing today.
There you go.
Thank you all for watching. We hope that you learned something from this episode. We appreciate you all for tuning in. Be safe out there, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great rest of your day.
Assalamu alaikum.